Senator John McCain joins us here on Al Jazeera. He is live in Washington, D.C., as also the senior member of the Senate Committee on Armed Services. Senator McCain, thanks very much for talking to us here on this news hour. Do you believe that North Korea will launch an attack?
I don't believe so, because it's suicidal. But to be certain of the behavior of a regime like this, to be bound by rational thought and action, I think is a serious mistake. The artillery that's at the demilitarized zone, only 20 miles from Seoul, embedded in caves, they have the ability to fire quite a bit before they're taken out. I mean, there's no doubt that the North Koreans would lose. But what kind of damage could they do in that period of time? It could be horrendous. But this is the fruit of failures of negotiations by both Republican and Democrat administrations, somehow believing that through basically bribery, food, oil, money, lifting of sanctions, that somehow the North Koreans would be deterred from the path that they were on, and that is a missile and a weapon capable of being delivered, which then gives them a place on the world stage they otherwise wouldn't have. It's a failure of American appreciation for what the North Koreans were intent on doing.
It is that irrationality that leaves an awful lot of people worried. If I can, Senator McCain, I'll get on to the possibility of diplomacy in just a moment, but I'd like to ask about your assessment of this U.S. intelligence report suggesting that North Korea has the capability now of mounting a nuclear device on a missile that could travel 2,000 to 3,000 kilometers. What do you make of that information?
Well, the testimony yesterday by the head of our national intelligence was full of caveats because we are not certain. But isn't it logical to assume that if they have continued this work over many, many, many years, that they would have that capability at some point in time? And by the way, don't think the Iranians aren't watching how we react to what the North Koreans are doing as their centrifuges continue to spin.
So we have this congressman inadvertently, we understand, reading out a document which was incorrectly labeled unclassified when it should have said classified, and he said the DIA, that's the Defense Intelligence Agency, assesses with moderate confidence the North Korea has nuclear weapons capable of delivery by ballistic missiles. If, through the irrational actions of the leader of North Korea, the metaphorical button is pressed and it goes off, how feasible is it that that could be taken out before it caused serious damage?
We can take out their missile at launch. We can take out the missile at launch. Then the question is will they, if we did that, what would the North Korean reaction to that be? It's also, by the way, a strong argument for missile defense, which is a debate which has been going on in this country ever since Ronald Reagan. But I think the question is not so much do they have that capability now, but isn't it inevitable, the path that they're on, that sooner or later they would have that capability?
It sort of begs the question there, Senator, that how do you spot the difference between a test launch and an attack? And if it were a test and the Americans or the Japanese or South Koreans could take out that missile on the launch pad, would it do so if it were a test and risk the escalation that might bring with it?
Well, you know, that's a decision that the President of the United States, hopefully in consultation with our South Korean friends, would have to make. But obviously we have to err on the safe side. I don't think there's any doubt about it. And this new information, I think, would lean the decision towards taking it out. And there's another aspect of this, very briefly, if I could mention that, of course, is China. China is the only country that has the ability to rein in North Korean behavior. They can shut down their economy, which is incredibly weak, as we know. And so it's rather shameful behavior on the part of China because this risk continues to grow dramatically. And I would point out again what we all know but seem to ignore: in the largest gulag in the world, some 200,000 people are in prison, being tortured, murdered, raped in the most unspeakable way. This is a regime that is more than an outlaw in just their acquisition of weapons of mass destruction.
You bring up China, Senator McCain. Let's hear what John Kerry had to say about that a couple of hours ago, and then talk about the reaction there should be.
No country in the world has as close a relationship or as significant an impact on the DPRK than China. China has an enormous ability to help make a difference here. And I hope that in our conversations when I get there tomorrow, we'll be able to lay out a path ahead that can defuse this tension, that can allow the people of the North and the South and other people in the world to recognize that people are moving this in the right direction, which is towards negotiations and towards a reduction in the current level of tension.
So, Senator McCain, we see John Kerry heading off to talk to the Chinese leadership. You have said China's positioning on this has been shameful. You've described the diplomatic toing and froing over the years as damned foolishness and hubris on the part of our diplomatic corps and administration. You clearly don't think the approach at the moment is correct. What, in your opinion, should be done now?
Well, China's not only not acting in a mature fashion as far as North Korea is concerned, but also as far as their continued assertiveness in the South China Sea, which, by the way, have united countries in the region in a way that we never thought were possible, and also their failure to their continued veto over sanctions over the massacre that's taking place in Syria. So there has to be, and not to mention the cyber attacks that we have even traced back to a building in Beijing. So they're not behaving in the way that a world superpower should be behaving. So there's got to be consequences. That doesn't mean that we get into a confrontation with China, but it does mean that we continue our military presence in the region. We work closely with their allies. We condemn in international forums their continued assertion that somehow the South China Sea is within Chinese territory. In other words, there are many ways that we could respond in a way that to tell the Chinese that it's not business as usual until they start behaving in a manner which we had anticipated years ago when we normalized relations between our two countries. Now, I realize we owe the Chinese a whole lot of money and that they have influence, but their behavior has got to improve. Otherwise, there's going to be some kind of crisis in that part of the world.
I hear what you say about Kim Jong-un, Senator, and you make the point in an interview on an American network that more than once wars have been started by accident. What will it take now to prevent that happening?
I think now that, one, China, two, that we make it clear to the North Koreans that any missile launch that we have any suspicion about that we will take out, and that we will go back for more sanctions, much more effective ones. Look, it was the Bush administration that lifted sanctions against North Korea, that freed up their bank account in Macau, that on the hopes that we would make progress. We've been through this cycle of confrontation, assistance, negotiations, confrontation, assistance. We've been going through that for the last several decades. None of it has worked. Let's look at another way of approaching it. And again, that is got a lot to do with China, but it's also got a lot to do with increased sanctions on North Korea, including, by the way, luxury goods, which their ruling elite enjoys very much.
Senator McCain, we appreciate you taking the time to talk to us here on Al Jazeera.
Thank you. It's good to be with you again.